In this video, we're going to talk about a special kind of channel, one that can be started on demand. And this is new. We haven't talked about it yet. So this is dynamically starting a channel. So channel starting. Now, we actually did cover part of this. So if you go to page 39, you'll see an initiation queue is a local queue to which the queue manager writes a trigger message when certain conditions are met on another local queue. For example, this is done when a message is put into an empty message queue or in a transmission queue. Such a trigger message is transparent to the programmer, so the programmer is not doing this at all. This is happening inside of the MQ, but it's an extremely powerful mechanism to cause applications, which is what we have looked at, or channels, which is something we have not yet looked at, what we're going to look at in this video, to start executing only when there is work to be processed. So we've already seen this done in the case of applications. That was the trigger monitor. And in the case of channels, we have something called a channel initiator. And that's what we're going to look at. So if you remember correctly from last time, we had said that we have over here this MQI, and that's attached to our application, a.exe, and that is going to connect over to, and remember, we had called it MQI in the last time we looked at this, but actually we know now that that's really an L. And just so we can clearly see this, draw this whole out. And we had said that this was our VM, and it was for the message queue system, and that this connection here was going to take place to, let's draw it similar to the way we did the first time. So we have our queue manager sitting here, and inside the queue manager we have our, we're going to draw it like this, one big A underscore Q, and let's actually draw this a little higher so we can connect these. There we go. And so we had said that this was A underscore Q, and we know that this is actually an L sitting here. I'm just going to draw it sort of big like this, and you'll see it should be pretty clear that this is our L. And the MQI is, of course, going to talk to this L, right? And we know that there is a queue in here, of course. It's going to look like this, where messages will accumulate. And then separately, when we created this queue, we had defined it in a way that it was associated with something called an initiation queue. And that initiation queue looked like this. Initiation queue, and it would have its own messages in it. But the interesting thing about that, remember, was that the system that was putting messages in here was not our application. It was not this at all. It was the QM system, and it said, oh, whoa, I see that I've got a message. It just came in on here over this connection here, and I'm going to create a message, a trigger message, and I'm going to trigger message, and I'm going to put that in this queue, just like that. And then all the while, there was this thing out here called a trigger monitor. And this trigger monitor, it's on the message queue machine. It's here. It's on this VM. But it's not inside the queue monitor, right? It is outside of the queue monitor. Sorry, the queue manager. Okay, in any case, so this message comes through. It's on the initiation queue. And then the trigger monitor does an MQ get. And once that happens, the whole point of all of this is that you would have this application out here, b.exe, running. It would be triggered to launch. So it would do this over like that, and it would launch B, just like that. So that was the case of dynamically launching an application. But as we saw here, that was just one approach, right? Was to launch the application dynamically. But now we're talking about launching a channel dynamically. And this is different and also interesting. So instead of this trigger monitor that we had said was here, this whole thing is going to go away. The thing itself is going to stay, but the fact that it's a trigger monitor will go away, at least in name, and it will now be called a Channel Initiator. And you could probably imagine from the name what on earth that is going to do. This b.exe completely goes away. It's not even an application anymore. Launching is still going to stay there, but only in the fact that this has been now completely replaced by this new icon, which is a channel, represents a channel. And this channel is, I'm going to call it A.B, and you're going to see why in a little while. But I'm going to call it A.B. This channel is going to be turned on. So the channel was here, but it wasn't running. It wasn't turned on. And this is the same scenario as we had seen with b.exe, but now it is a channel. So here is that in writing. The Channel Initiator is a special version of a trigger monitor. Remember, it was a trigger monitor before, now it's a Channel Initiator. In fact, it's really the same idea, that it is a special version of a trigger monitor that is used to start channels. By default, the Channel Initiator is automatically started when the queue manager starts. The only additional requirement for channels to be automatically started is to set the trigger attributes on the transmission queue. So we had seen this before, and it looked like this. So we had done the define queue local AQ, and we had said replace, by the way, just replace the existing definition that was there if there was one, and it will set up the trigger. So we had created this A_Q, and we said there's a trigger involved, and the trigger type is first, and we had said, well, there's an initiation queue, and this is just a sort of, there's the graphic of what we've done before. There's the initiation queue, and then we have this process, and then that process is shown down here, and it's running locally on the same MQ system, and there it is. So that was what we had said before, and take a look at this. This is the definition for setting up the Channel Initiator. Very, very close. Notice that we have the sort of the change here being XMIT, which is our transmission queue, right? So we had talked about transmission queues. Those are the ones that get us from point A to point B, where point B is on a remote system. That is it's really a remote queue, so transmit queue. And it's the internal representation. Go back, if that's a little confusing, go back to the video on the transmission queue, and you'll see what that means. But essentially, I was just trying to point out the differences here. There really aren't too many.